diesel a year, part of which it uses to produce drinking water for the island's 11,000 residents.
At the moment, we provide 3 million cubic meters of water to El Hierro a year. 60% of that comes from wells, directly connected to our volcanic island's groundwater. And the other 40% comes from seawater.
Until now, the 3 water desalination plants were driven by fossil fuel. Very soon, they'll be driven by electricity from renewable energy. That means the island's government will make substantial savings for the public purse. The residents of El Hierro have long dreamt of living on an unpolluted island. Amos has a hotel and is proud to see his homeland taking part in a project that will make it unique.
Yes, it's a dream for me. 30 years ago, we began working on this project, and today it's become reality. Today, I no longer feel isolated. If there is a problem in the world with oil, we don't need to start worrying.
The opening of the new power plant won't lead to cheaper energy prices, but that doesn't worry him.
We have to pay for electricity like they do in Madrid or Barcelona. It's the same. But because here the island's government has a majority stake in the plant, they'll be able to sell electricity to the operator. And we think that'll save 4 million euros a year that will be reinvested in social projects.
Green energy is also good news for tourism. Amos is even renting out electric bikes. The next challenge for the island is to move over to non-polluting forms of transport. The goal is to replace all El Hierro's cars with electric vehicles by 2020. Antonio is one of the first to make the switch.
We've decided to invest in this car to make our contribution to the island, with the goal being to make the most of the energy provided by nature.
He recharges his car at a point installed by the town hall. In order to further minimise pollution, El Hierro recycles all its natural waste and promotes organic farming. The authorities are offering young people like Lydia land at extremely low rents. Lydia began growing produce a few months ago with 2 friends.
There are 10 of us who share this greenhouse at the moment. And of course, everything is organic.
Lydia sells her vegetables to supermarkets on the island. She wants to persuade as many residents here to go organic as possible so she can make a living from her new venture.
If we do well, we'll soon be able to pay for 3 salaries for 3 people. When we finish the outside, the hardest job, we think it'll take us about a year if everything goes well.
80% of El Hierro was declared a biosphere reserve by UNESCO in 2000. The authorities now want the rest of the island to get the same classification. By becoming the first island to be 100% fueled by renewables, El Hierro wants to attract tourists, but above all, to become a model of sustainable living.
Now, for more on this, I'm joined on set by Jacques Trainer, a physicist and professor at Paris's Sciences Po University. Hello, thank you very much indeed for coming in. First of all, what's your reaction to that plant in El Hierro? It's a pioneering project, isn't it?
Well, as one of the men said, the different technologies are known. The originality of that is that they're
combining a few different types of
wind energy with hydroelectricity, but hydroelectricity and this kind of energy storage by pumping, we have that in France. We have 5 gigawatts of that kind of devices, and it's used for adjusting the electricity demand, which can be very sudden, and this is a very nice way to answer the demand. The problem of course, the question is whether we can generalize that. But the problem is to have a mountain. I mean, here, hydroelectricity means that you have a volcano, a dead volcano, and the crater has been adapted to have a storage of water of 500,000 cubic meters, something like this. And with 600 meters of height, you know, and then you can produce electricity. Now, the problem is that I don't see any mountain around Paris or around Berlin or around, you know, most of the sites where you can install dams like this are already used in the Alps or maybe there are some possibilities in Norway and something like this. But,
so there
but
are
that's
islands
the problem.
Inspired by this project, but
If
what
they
you're
have
saying
mountains,
is that cities, other places, wouldn't have the right landscape.
They have to have a mountain around, you know, cliffs or high cliffs or a mountain or something like this. Otherwise, if you don't have the height, then the area that you need is huge. If you don't have, instead of 600 meters, if you have 10 meters, then the surface you need is huge.
Okay,
so
it
that's
couldn't
a
be
problem.
applied to a whole country, this kind of technology.
No, I don't think
but
so.
if we speak more generally about
Yes.
certain countries, which ones would you say are leading the way when it comes to renewables?
Well, I'm not that concerned about renewables. I'm really concerned about greenhouse gas emissions. And because I think that the real problem, the most important problem, is to avoid greenhouse gas emissions.
Because you could emit a lot and at the same time have a whole bunch of wind farms and they wouldn't necessarily cancel each other out.
One of the questions, and it's a very interesting subject actually, is considering Germany, for example, which has installed around 60 gigawatts of renewable power, and their CO2 emissions are still increasing. And how come? So the problem is that these renewable energies, the wind energy, for example, is intermittent. There's wind, no wind, you don't decide that, you know. And if you don't have wind, what do?
So what
and
could
what they do, they buy coal or lignite, peat, and it's a lot of CO2 emission. So it's a real problem. You cannot extrapolate that because of this question of intermittency, which they solve in this island having hydroelectricity around. But that's a specificity of this island.
And we saw that on this island, another concern is transport, because
Yes,
of
course.
that's
Yeah.
a big area.
Yeah.
We saw that El Hierro aims to get more people using cars.
Okay, that's very good.
How big an issue is that in other countries?
It's a very big issue. For example, if you take Norway, which is a small country, but anyway, Norway doesn't emit anything, any CO2, when producing electricity, because all its electricity comes from hydroelectricity. So there is no CO2 emissions. But it's the first emitter per person in Europe because of transportation and heating and so on. And in France, for example, where we have nuclear energy, so it's not CO2 emitting, the electricity is just 30% of our energy consumption. So there's still 70%, and what do you do with that?
People often talk about the cost of all of this. Do you
Yes.
think that governments would be better off than spending money on trying to do something about transport and CO2 emissions rather than renewables?
In France?
In France and in other countries?
It depends. There's no general rule. In France, for sure, that would be the right choice. I mean,
Why is that?
to have renewable heat and not renewable electricity, because our electricity system doesn't emit CO2, very, very little CO2, like 6 times less than Germany. But so the real problem is transportation and heat. And you can have renewable heat with biomass, for example. So everybody is focused on renewable electricity, which can be an issue in Poland, for example, because they have, all their electricity comes from coal. But in France, it's not an issue. The issue in France is really isolation, and transportation. These are the two main issues.
Okay. I'm afraid that we've run out of time. Thank you very much for coming in, Jacques Trener.
Thank you.
So that's it for Focus, and that's it for our 2-hour live show. I'll be back, though, in a few minutes with a full news roundup for you. Don't go away.